When does anime criticism become too much? When has everything that can be possibly said about a show been said already? Is there a limit to how much can be said about any given title? These are all interesting questions to ask, and my answer is that I do believe there's a limit, but it's a limit that will probably never be reached. Think of it in terms of music composition. There may be a limit to how many songs can actually be made, but there's so much still being created and so many ways the sound can be altered or switched up that it's highly unlikely that such a limit will ever be reached. Now, before I continue any further, allow me to elaborate. I'm referring to criticism defined as the analysis and judgment of the merits and faults of a literary or artistic work, not criticism in a purely negative sense. My reasonings for why I believe this to be the case are fairly simple. The world is always changing, things are always progressing. While one individual may not have too much to say about a work that they feel is all that interesting at one point in time, things can change. And with that, thoughts on how a work functions or how a work can be interpreted change as well. A great example of this is Naruto, and how one may enjoy the series as a kid, but as they grow older, find its presentation and themes to be too alienating for them. Or maybe how they had initially enjoyed or not enjoyed the series, but then as the series further progresses, there may be events that take place in the show that change that opinion, be it from positive to negative or vice versa. But even if we aren't talking about something that is still ongoing, there's plenty of older titles that are still relevant, still being talked about, and still have people presenting new ideas on them. Neon Genesis Evangelion, by all accounts, should have nothing new to say about it, since the series came out in 1995, and putting the rebuilds aside, has a noticeable beginning, middle, and end. But as people rewatch the show, they still find new ways to go about interpreting the scenes. People are still debating over what the events and end of Evangelion mean almost 20 years after the fact. Or, if we want to go even older, Akira is still being discussed, and people are still finding new ways to talk about that work. Whether it be its historical context or how it might be viewed today, criticism is still ongoing in spite of that film not only being almost 30 years old, but also being released on Western shores a lot earlier than most discussed anime, thus being in the public conscious of non-Japanese anime fans for much longer than many anime are today. The changes in how ideas can be transmitted may lead people to believe that with this, it's far easier to run out of new ways to discuss or criticize the show, since everyone now has a voice on the internet. While it may be true that everyone has their own platform to discuss an anime, it's also very important to note that with this new platform comes new ways to present an idea. YouTube, for example, has allowed not only for what's spoken in an anime video through words to be important, but also what's spoken through visuals. So let's hypothetically say that there are two videos on Future Diary, and they both criticize a lot of the same things. Now, assuming one of them hasn't been plagiarized, each individual may have a different personality displayed throughout the piece, or include specific cadences in how the piece is read, ultimately making each individual piece worthwhile on its own. In other words, if one video on Future Diary takes a more humorous approach to the criticism, while another takes a more serious approach, they are each different enough for both pieces to still be valuable. Or, even if both take a humorous approach, what kind of humor they may rely on might be different. So it goes even further than just a different tone, it's how this tone is utilized which also may be important to differentiating both pieces. With the rise of this brand new platform, there are many who may see too much discussion on one show to be oversaturation. You look at discussion on Re:Zero or One Punch Man when those shows came out, some may say that fandoms pushed it too far, but I must stress that I believe it's still important to allow discussions on these shows to still continue. Because while you may not be interested in discussion on these shows, Many people are interested, and it's unfair to them to tell them they can't discuss it. I'm not, of course, referring to off-topic discussion. Like, let's say you're talking about Mutsu Enmei Ryu Gaiden Shura no Toki, and someone randomly brings up One Punch Man while not really connecting it to what you're discussing, then I think it's fair to want an on-topic discussion. Though with this, I must address the elephant in the room. Sword Art Online. The anime people are so sick of hearing about that they're outright telling people to stop criticizing the series. While I understand how many discussions on the show can get a bit heated, and I don't believe it's wrong to speak out when it delves into petty insults, I do not agree with the practice of telling people to stop discussing the show altogether, or to write off any discussion on the series as automatically bad just because it's discussion on Sword Art Online. Yes, there may be a large amount of criticism revolving around that series, and while many of the criticism can be seen as very similar, as I've said earlier, the approach may be different. And as time goes on, the perception of how specific events occur in the series may change, thus creating new discussion on it. Now, that's not to say that all criticism will be interesting to everyone, just like how all anime doesn't appeal to every single person. If there's a lack of criticism on an anime you want to discuss, then be the first to engage the discussion and get people to talk about shows that you really haven't seen too much discussion on. Maybe it'll introduce people to a new favorite, or maybe it'll completely change how they perceived the work at first if they were unsure how to feel about it. I see no reason criticism on popular titles cannot coexist with criticism on lesser-known titles. People can even take what they know about these lesser-known titles and compare and contrast this with more popular shows, thus creating new discussion on the series that may have not been addressed prior. I'm sure not too many individuals bothered comparing Hanasaku Iroha with Silver Spoon, for example, but while watching both shows at around the same time, I was able to find parallels in both shows that allowed for me to create different criticism. With all of this in mind, I don't believe we'll ever reach a point where anime criticism becomes too much. Things are always changing, there's always a new way on how to perceive anime, and even if similar criticisms are made, how these criticisms are presented can differentiate from piece to piece. Sure, there may be a large amount of discussion on a particular title, but I don't really see this as a bad thing, since increasing the greater discourse is ultimately beneficial. As long as this discussion can coexist with other discussion, then I don't see what's wrong with it existing. So let's all go out and discuss some anime. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, feel free to give it a like, as well as subscribe if you'd like to see some more content in the future. Discord links in the description if you'd like to chat. And as always, I'll catch you later.